Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Paula Mellom, the Associate Director for the Center for Latino Achievement and Success in Education at the University of Georgia's College of Education. I'm here today to talk to you about our professional learning opportunities for teachers in collaborative interaction to increase the achievement of diverse learners. We have, for the last few years, been developing professional learning around a particular kind of pedagogy called the instructional conversation, which has amassed over 40 years of research behind it, showing that it increases the academic and social achievement of diverse learners. In our most recent randomized controlled trial, conducted through the Center for Latino Achievement and Success in Education, or CLASE, we have found that this particular pedagogy is good for all learners and increases their academic achievement, but it is particularly useful for English language learners. As you can see from the chart behind me, the red bars, that is the academic achievement of English language learners and non-English language learners in our treatment classrooms. That is to say, the classrooms where we had teachers who were using this pedagogy. The blue bars or gray bars are the business as usual classrooms, good classrooms with good teaching, but it didn't have the instructional conversation. As you might notice by looking at the little stars, the classrooms that had instructional conversation had statistically significant increases for English language learners. They also had increases for non-English language learners, but it was only statistically significant in reading. But it was still better than business as usual classrooms. But what's also important, and something that we have also started to take real notice of and are starting to do some research about, is that the instructional conversation pedagogy has other impacts that go beyond academic achievement. It increases their writing skills. It seems counterintuitive, but actually having conversations about content and about what they're learning improves students' ability to then write about it, and then they are more successful in their writing, both in standard assessments and formative assessments, but also in their more high-stakes writing assessments. Our teachers also tell us that the instructional conversation pedagogy really causes improvement in individual and classroom behavior. So students become more self-aware, they become more self-controlled, and it also just improves the general climate of the classroom, so that it's not just when the kids are doing the instructional conversation, but also when they're out on the playground, when they're in the cafeteria. The cafeteria workers are saying, "Oh my goodness, what are you doing with these children? They're so well behaved." They're saying, "I respectfully disagree with you," when they're solving conflicts amongst themselves and other children. And this is a huge deal. We also find that when there are a number of classrooms that are using this instructional conversation throughout the school, there comes this tipping point where all of a sudden the entire culture of the school gets impacted. We have had a number of principals who have told us that they attribute a change in the culture of the school to this teaching and pedagogy. But what's also really important for our teachers to know and for the administrators to know is that being able to use this instructional conversation pedagogy improves a teacher's ability to get to know their students. They can formatively assess, they can see how their students think, and then they can go back and think about how they are planning and what they need to teach, because they now know what their kids know and what they don't know. So what is the instructional conversation then? Well, it's based on these 5 standards of effective pedagogy that were identified through a large meta-study conducted by the University of California, Berkeley's Center CREED, called CREED. And what they found through this meta-study of different pedagogies that work for diverse learners is that 5 different kinds of teaching stood out. And they include purposeful conversation. This is not conversation for conversation's sake. This is conversation around a clear academic focus. They also found that language and literacy development across the curriculum was key. So if you're teaching English language arts, you have language and literacy goals. But if you're teaching social studies or biology or any other mathematics, all of those different subject matters are going to have a language and literacy goal. So you're going to have language and literacy goals across the curriculum. They also found that having challenging activities was incredibly important. You had to maintain the complexity for your lessons regardless of the level of your students. So it was not appropriate or ever okay to say, oh, poor babies, they just can't handle this, we're just going to make it easier. It wasn't about making it easier, it's about making it accessible. So maintaining the challenge and maintaining the rigor was also key. They also found that contextualizing for meaning was incredibly important for diverse learners. We learn when we know what we can put the content attached to, and we attach our content knowledge to things that we already know. But if the teacher and the student are very, very different in what they know and in their background knowledge, then it's sometimes very difficult for the teacher to be able to understand how to contextualize that learning for their students. So the instructional conversation helps to provide those opportunities for the teachers to get to know their students and be able to thereby contextualize the content. And at the center, as you see in this graphic that we have, at the center of all these four other things, these four other important areas that we need to be focusing on, is this thing called the JPA. And the JPA is a joint productive activity. And what that basically means is that the students are working together to solve a problem that does not have a single or easily arrived at answer. And this may be a problem that has multiple ways of solving it, or it may be a problem that does not, that may have multiple answers. But the students are working together to solve this problem. You also might notice that there's a circle at the bottom of the JPA square, and inside that circle it says I see. And I see is an instructional conversation. And I see is a particular kind of JPA, and it's a JPA when you have a teacher present. So the students are still working on this problem, they're still working together to solve this problem, but the teacher is there to formatively assess, to ask probing questions, to bump up that learning, or to differentiate and give support where support might be needed for students who may not have that content, have that clear content understanding. But it's most important for our teachers to be able to formatively assess their students. So this IC, or instructional conversation, is critical because it changes the way that we think about teaching. It really is a paradigm shift. We go from this more ping-pong kind of classroom where the teacher talks to the student and the student talks to the teacher. So Dr. Mellom asks Diego, what do you think about this? Diego responds and talks to Dr. Mellom. Dr. Mellom then talks to Jose and says, Jose, what do you think about this? And Jose answers. And then Dr. Mellom talks to Susan and says, Susan, what do you think about this? In this very ping-pong fashion. This is a typical classroom environment. In the instructional conversation, we shift from the ping-pong, where it's teacher-student, teacher-student, to what is more like a pinball machine. And for those of you who remember what a pinball machine is, this is where the teacher is there as a facilitator to create the lesson, to create the problem, and to throw that ball out into the machine. And then the students together, collectively, in their small group of 3 to 7 students, will bounce these ideas around together, listen to each other, answer each other's questions, build on each other's ideas, and solve the problem collectively. The teacher is there only to act as those flippers, to start the thing, to start the problem, and then to keep the ball from falling out of the machine. So if you see that the conversation is stalling, if the students have a misconception, you bounce that ball back up into the machine, and it keeps going back and forth among the students. But what often happens for teachers is that as soon as they see that there's a problem, they want to go in and save their students. And this is really very natural. Teachers are there, they want to teach, they don't want to see their students struggle, and if they see them starting to have real problems or real difficulties, they think, I have to give it to them. But the instructional conversation pedagogy allows them the time and the tools to be able to get the students into the learning pit, what we call the learning pit, but then give them the tools to be able to get out and create that deep learning, so that when they're in the bottom of the pit and they're feeling great despair, the teacher doesn't have to go and give them the hand and pull them out. The students themselves have the tools to be able to work together to move out on their own, and the teacher can see where they may have misconceptions and give them those probing questions to get out on their own. But as we often say, when we're changing a paradigm, when we're changing the way that we do things, you can't just take something away without putting something else in there to fill in. So we found through our work and our professional learning that the teachers might agree with us and understand absolutely the theory behind all of this and say, yes, this is terrific, we really, really love this, but how? How do we do this? So through our professional learning practice and working with teachers, very closely with teachers and responding to their needs and to what they have done, we, together with the teachers, have developed some tools that fill in those blanks. When we take that one thing away and say, you can't do this anymore, do this, we're giving them the tools to be able to do this. So one of the things that we do is we help the teachers to develop conversation norms. Learning how to talk in a respectful way to solve problems and working together collaboratively is not natural or intuitive. It's learned. And so you have to get the tools to be able to do that, and you have to teach students how to do this. And teachers themselves have to learn how to do this. So we help you to develop these tools. We have also found that having tools to be able to talk respectfully to one another isn't enough. That you can have a respectful conversation, but still there's going to be one person who takes over, or there's going to be one person who interrupts, or there's going to be one person who just quietly sits, is very respectful and very responsible in the group, but they're not really saying very much. We've all done enough group work to know this particular scenario. So another tool that we've developed with working with the teachers is this idea of goal cards. We all know that we each have our own particular challenge. My particular challenge is talking too much. I talk too much. But that self-reflection and knowing that, I can say, I need to talk too much. So my goal then is to encourage others to talk. If my challenge was that I interrupted, maybe my goal would be to stop and allow other people to complete their thought, or ask other people what their thoughts are. We acknowledge and understand that everybody has a goal, and we encourage our teachers to work on these and with their students. And this also creates this sense of agency and autonomy and allows for a space for students to be able to work on their own collaboratively. Another one of the tools that we find that is very, very effective and necessary in that is this idea of a task card. Again, going back to this idea of creating autonomy and independence among our students, but also to maintain the rigor, maintain the focus, and help us with our intentional planning of our lessons. Because we know that, again, this idea of conversation, it's like, well, they're just talking, they might not be doing anything. Well, if we've intentionally planned and we have task cards, these task cards will help us to think about what our goal is, what standard is behind it, what our particular lesson is going to be focused on, what the problem is, and it helps us to think through those questions that we want our students to be thinking about and answering. And we in our professional learning program use these tools to allow the teachers to be able to practice with them and see. We, in that sense, practice what we preach. We're giving these opportunities to show the teachers not just, this is a great idea, go forth and do it. We're actually going to use it and do it. This is an example on the slide behind me is an example of a task card that we use in one of our professional learning workshops. And as you see, the slide itself is the task card itself is about the speaking and listening standards, which are often neglected in our schools. We think about the math standards and the reading standards and the science standards and the other content area standards, but actually we have speaking and listening standards. And this helps us to remind ourselves that these are actually things that we are supposed to be teaching. And it gives us a refresher on how to do that. So, as I said, sometimes having the theory is wonderful and terrific, and you can absolutely agree with it, but we often see our teachers don't know how to do that in our classroom. So one of the goals of our professional learning is to get our teachers the tools that they need to be able to take these abstract theories that they agree with and that they understand, but they don't know how to enact. Because we often hear our teachers say, man, that's terrific, but how do I do that? So one of the things that we do is develop tools that are practical, really applied, and hopefully take those abstract theories and give the teachers a means by which to enact them in their classroom. So, for example, the slide behind me, talks about the ZPD, the Zone of Proximal Development, which is a term that every teacher's heard of, every teacher could probably tell you in their sleep what it is, but it's really, really hard to think about how to intentionally plan their lessons using the ZPD, thinking about the ZPD. So this is one of the tools that we use. Another of these concepts, these difficult concepts, is this idea of contextualization. Absolutely, we all agree this is very, very important, but how does that look? How do you do that? This tool hopefully helps to give the teachers the tools to be able to do that and to think about this in a much more applied, practical, real way. So what does an instructional conversation look like? We have a short clip of a real classroom. It's a 5th grade classroom in an elementary school in Gwinnett County. This is a regular class with regular kids and a regular teacher who has been practicing the instructional conversation with us and has been working with us for a number of years now. When we took this film, she had only been working with us for about a year. And what we'd like for you to do as you watch this video is think about these questions. What do you notice about the academic language that the students are using? What do you notice about the social language and the social cues that they're using? What do you notice about the task? What is it is this task really difficult? Is it really, does it have all the bells and whistles? Does it have everything in the kitchen sink in it? What do you notice about this task? What do you notice about the conversational norms that the students are using to solve this problem? And how does that apply to the academic task at hand? And then what else do you think you know about these students just from looking at this video? Now take a minute, watch the video, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
Next sentence. Because Toby's Bugatti was in the shop.
That's a fragment. It's a fragment.
It's not a complete thought.
Because it's like well, a sentence shouldn't be so short. Like
if there was a comma between them and there's another sentence there, it could be.
It could be a complex. I agree with Toby and with Josh and Tia, because I think it's a fragment because it doesn't have like a complete sentence. It just starts with because Toby's Bugatti was in the shop. It doesn't tell why his Bugatti was in the shop.
I respectfully agree with everyone because it doesn't have a main idea. It's just like a random fragment that, like, what is it about? Why is it in the shop?
And I have something to add.
Yeah, what happened to it?
If I went up to somebody and said, because Toby's Bugatti was in the shop, they wouldn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you think, Jonas?
I think it is fragment because it's not complete sentence. Or it just start because.
You can start because, but it doesn't have.
It doesn't have like a meaning.
Comma and then another sentence.
Yeah.
So fragment, everyone agrees. Wait, do you agree, Kennedy?
Yes.
What did you see? Did you notice the way the students interacted using words like, I respectfully disagree with you, and then gave their reasons for why? Did you notice that they were actively using the academic language that were in the standards, the academic language that was in the standards that the teacher was trying to get them to learn for this lesson? Did you notice that the students were actually manipulating and using these words, not just like parrots, but they seemed to know what they were talking about? And they were talking about some pretty complex ideas here, like the idea of complex sentences, compound sentences, and what made those things, not just the terms that are used, but why and when and how. This is what we see in an instructional conversation. Now, in this particular clip, you don't see the teacher inserting herself much, but this is a very, very short clip. Further down in the lesson, you see her inserting herself when there are some pretty clear misconceptions. In fact, at one point, she has a sentence that she has read that says, Miss Hill ate. And the students go round and round and round about how this is a fragment because it's too short, and they have these ideas about what makes a fragment compared to what makes a complete sentence. And the teacher actually inserts herself and says, I can see why you would think that this is a fragment, but what makes a sentence? And then she talks to them about what makes a sentence. And she has this moment of recognizing and realizing that the students have a misconception about a complete sentence having to be long. And she acknowledges herself that they might think this because they've been preparing for the writing exam, and she's been encouraging them to give lots of detail and to talk about why and when and how, but they have misconstrued that, meaning a good sentence is one that has lots of detail, with a sentence is long. So it's a good moment for formative assessment, and you see that later on in the tape. So, our partnerships. Right now, we have partnerships with three big districts, very different districts. And I say this only to let you know that we work very closely with our districts, and they are very, very different in scope. And what we offer and what we do with the districts depends entirely on what the district says they need. We do not go in there and say, you need this. We work with the district and we say, hey, this is what we have to offer. What are your needs? How can we work together to make this happen? So we work right now, we've been working with Habersham County, Barrow County, and Gwinnett, which, as you know, are very, very different districts, and their needs are very different in scope, in size, in demographics. And that's I think one of the strengths of our professional learning program, and also of this particular pedagogy, because it's a pedagogy that can be used across different kinds of districts with different kinds of students, and also across the grade levels and across the disciplinary areas. As my colleague Jodi Weber says often, the wonderful thing about this particular pedagogy is that it's not a kit you can buy. The difficult thing about this particular pedagogy is that it's not a kit that you can buy. But we do work very closely with the districts to be able to make sure that we are responsive to whatever your needs are. And as the slide behind me says, we have a menu of different options, of different things that we offer and different ways that we offer this particular professional learning. We offer summer institutes, which are 3 days intensive. It's 30 hours of professional learning that we either do in a 3-day intensive or we do in 4 days, kind of more business hours. Again, being responsive to the teacher's needs in locations that are responsive to the teachers and district's needs. And this is kind of the intensive introduction to the theory and the practice. After that, we work with the teachers and the student and the districts to create a menu of options for follow-up, because we do recognize that professional learning without some, particularly in this kind of pedagogy, which is a real paradigm shift, requires follow-up and some sustainability with the districts afterwards. It's not enough to just say, okay, here we've done it. Good luck with that. Go forth and be. We really do recognize that there needs to be some sustainability and some sustained learning afterwards. So we have a menu of options which include observations in the classroom, observations of videotapes that you send of your classroom and your teaching, that we then use a rubric, a tested rubric, to give you some feedback. We also work with coaches, we work with administrators, and we do renewals, face-to-face renewals in the fall and in the spring. These are all different options that we offer to the districts for our professional learning. We've also developed a unique and wonderful new way to do professional learning across districts and within schools themselves, and that is an online professional learning platform. This, as I say, is a unique, wonderful platform that offers webinars, that offers a space for teacher lesson planning collectively and collaboratively, for teacher lesson plan exchange, for teachers to blog with one another and to ask each other questions, to ask us questions. We have blogs that we put out bi-monthly. We're hoping to do them bi-monthly on different topics that teachers have said are important to them. And we hope that this particular platform will offer the opportunity for teachers, as I said, within schools, within districts, and across districts, to be able to collaborate with one another. And we've also begun working internationally with this platform so that teachers can now begin to work with teachers in other countries to develop their lessons and to work with the instructional conversation, and for their students to have an opportunity to work with other students across districts and internationally. And we just kind of like to close with what teachers have to say about the pedagogy. Now, these are voices of real teachers. We don't have videos of them, we just have their voices, but we wanted you to hear what they have to say about the difference that this has made in their classroom and their perceptions of what the positive impacts are of the instructional conversation pedagogy and the professional learning that CLASE provides.
The kids that I got this year actually, for the first time, were exposed to ICs in 4th grade. I teach 5th grade. So they are the pros. But it has been so neat to see how the IC has just transformed our classroom environment. I mean, from like math groups to anything that they're working on, they can problem solve and work as a group together to tackle these really challenging tasks in ways that I haven't seen before. And I know it's this that has done it.
I think too, it's helped me see like misconceptions. Like when I did my one that we recorded, I was doing base 10 blocks, and we call them base 10 blocks. You know, that's what the frameworks, all that, you know. Well, one of my brightest kids kept counting them wrong. And I was like, what is she doing? You know, because Amy's in there recording, and I'm like, oh God, what is she doing? And she was like, there's 10 blocks. And I finally got the base 10 blocks was blowing her mind, because she was counting the 10s as base 10 blocks. And it was like, oh my gosh. Like I've taught 2nd grade for like 8 years, and I had never ever thought of that before. And so after I was able to stand up, I was able to talk through it with my whole class, because I have like 8 ESOL kids in there. I was able to talk through it, because I mean, if this very bright, not even served ESOL kid anymore is having this misconception, probably others are. So it helps me kind of reflect and say, okay, yeah, that needs to be taught into a little bit more, you know. And so it was.
But without that instructional conversation, like you said, you never. And it was in almost every 2nd grade, because they all did the same IC, and they almost all had one student or more had the same misconception. But every teacher was able to realize that, then stop and address that misconception. Whereas if the conversation wouldn't have happened, they wouldn't have understood what that was. Why did they get that wrong on the assessment, or why did they get that wrong? They wouldn't have understood what the misconception was. So.
Thank you so much for your time and for listening to me talk today about the CLASE's professional learning in the instructional conversation and collaborative interaction. We look forward to hearing from you and hope that we might be able to work with you and your teachers to increase the academic and social achievement of your diverse learners and all of your learners in your classroom. We really love working with schools and love working with the teachers. It's what makes us wake up in the morning. So please, if you have any questions or concerns or ideas, please feel free to contact us. Look us up on our website, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.